we need to talk about something heavy. We're going to walk through a hypothetical war between the US, Israel, and Iran. But for me, this scenario is no longer just a hypothetical. It has just become terrifyingly real.
And when I say personal, I mean it. Just yesterday morning, I was in Dubai with my family. We were staying literally across the street from the Fairmont Hotel on Palm Jumeirah, one of the hotels where an explosion was seen. It's one thing to talk about war, but it's another thing completely when it lands right on your doorstep. It just hits different. We got lucky. We managed to catch an early flight out and everything seemed totally normal. But a few hours after we took off, the news started flooding in. The entire Dubai airport was evacuated, filled with thick smoke. Drones and missiles were literally being shot out of the sky over the city's most famous landmarks, like the Burj Khalifa. And get this, my own family members who had a later flight were stranded there. It was absolute chaos.
So you have to ask yourself, right? What on earth could possibly trigger a scene like this? Well, we got the answer soon after we landed. And honestly, it was staggering.
This wasn't some limited strike. This wasn't a small border skirmish. No, this was a full-scale invasion. A massive, coordinated military campaign aimed right at the very heart of Iran. The mission was codenamed Operation Epic Fury, and it was planned as a multi-day assault. The stated goal, to completely annihilate Iran's missile industry. We're talking bombs falling on major cities all across the country. Tehran, Isfahan, you name it. But believe it or not, that wasn't even the most shocking piece of news. Then, Iranian state TV confirmed the unthinkable. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, had been killed in an airstrike on his compound. And it wasn't just him. His daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter were also killed. This wasn't just a military operation anymore. This was a decapitation strike, an attempt to cut the head right off the Iranian regime. And Iran's response? Well, it was immediate, it was overwhelming, and it targeted the entire region. They called it Operation True Promise 4. Just try to wrap your head around the scale of this retaliation. Iran launched over 1,000 missiles just at the UAE. Now yeah, defense systems reportedly intercepted most of them, 1,132 to be exact. But can you even imagine the terror of looking up and seeing a sky filled with that much incoming fire? This is Iran's strategy in action. Overwhelm the enemy, create total panic, and prove that nowhere is safe.
And don't think for a second this was random. Oh no, this was highly targeted. 27 American military bases came under fire, and there were reports of a direct hit on the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. The message could not have been clearer. American assets all across the region were in the crosshairs.
And this is where we get to the immense human element. Beyond the military targets, there are over 10 million Indians who live and work in these Gulf countries. These aren't just abstract conflict zones on a map. These are places where our friends, our relatives, and millions of workers suddenly found themselves right on the front line of a war. So all this chaos pretty quickly becomes a direct crisis for a country like India, which is just so deeply connected to the region, both with our economy and our people. Experts call this India's nightmare scenario, and as you can see, it all comes down to the Strait of Hormuz. Think of it like a critical choke point, a tiny waterway that a massive amount of the world's oil has to squeeze through. With Iran threatening to shut it down, more than half of India's crude oil supply is at risk. And you know what that means, right? Petrol prices would go through the roof, inflation would run rampant, and the rupee would be under huge pressure. The entire Indian economy would feel those shockwaves.
The timing of this attack also raised some really serious questions. The Indian Prime Minister had just finished a visit to Israel. He was dining with their Prime Minister, addressing their parliament, so critics were incredibly quick to point out that this visit, happening right before an attack on Iran, a country often called India's old friend, sent a really difficult message.
But look, beyond all the geopolitics and the economics, we have to talk about the most devastating part of any conflict, and that is always the cost paid by innocent civilians.
In the Iranian city of Minab, a bomb struck a girls' primary school. It happened during the day when the school was full. At least 100 children were killed.
And this is where you really see the jarring reality of modern conflict. Shortly after the news broke about the school bombing, this was the message that was tweeted from Israel's official account. The claim of self-defense after initiating the first strike, right there next to the deaths of 100 children.
So how did it get to this point? Was this whole thing just inevitable? Well, the backstory suggests this wasn't some sudden escalation at all, but a very planned confrontation.
So,
The crisis really started months earlier. In late 2025, Iran's economy totally collapsed, leading to these massive protests. The government responded with a brutal crackdown, killing tens of thousands. Then, just as things seemed to be cooling down, there was this tiny glimmer of hope. An Omani minister said a peace deal was within reach. But the very next day, the bombs started to fall. Reports now suggest this attack was planned for months, with heavy lobbying from both Israel and Saudi Arabia, which makes that glimmer of hope feel like a cruel illusion.
The end goal was made brutally clear in a message from the US president directly to the Iranian people. I mean, this rhetoric is eerily familiar, right? It's a lot like what we heard in the lead-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, framing the attack as an act of liberation.
And this brings us to the fundamental question at the very heart of this kind of conflict. It's a question that history has asked and answered before.
The argument is always the same. We have to remove a dictator for the good of the people. But let's just look at the track record. When foreign powers intervened to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, was the result a flourishing democracy? No. It was the total collapse of the state. It created power vacuums that led to decades of civil war and the birth of new terror groups, making life for ordinary people arguably much, much worse.
So we're left with this crucial question. After the bombs stop falling and the dictator is gone, what comes next? Will this war actually bring freedom to the people of Iran? Or is it more likely to just shatter another nation, create a new failed state, and an even more dangerous world? History seems to have an answer, and it's a terrifying one.